Podcasting, how to get started. Well, that's the topic that we're going to cover today. And thank you to all those people who requested we do this particular episode. I'm going to try and cram as much value into this episode as I possibly can. A lot to get through. So stay tuned right to the end because there are some special thoughts that you don't want to miss out on. Welcome to Podcast Done For You, the show where we make it as easy as possible for you to make the right choices to advance your podcasting career. So let's get started on the show. So, you want a podcast? Well, the first question that I'm going to ask you is, that you have to ask yourself, is why? Why do you want the podcast? It's a really important question to answer because if you are talking about how to get started in a podcast, you have to have a reason for it. Now, if it's about a hobby based and it's just for fun, no problems at all. That's fantastic. Some of the things we're going to go through today are very appropriate for you, but I would say to you, make sure you can put the time in, make sure you can fund it because a hobby-based podcast can take up quite a bit of time as well. And if there's no actual return on investment other than fun, well, that's up to you to decide whether it's worthwhile or not. I specifically want to talk to all of those business people out there today. Why do you want a podcast? Well, I can tell you the primary answer should be to build your brand. You want more opportunities coming to you. You want to be the go-to person. In order to be that, you have to be out more. You have to be seen more. People have to hear what actually differentiates you. And that should be the primary reason why you are going ahead with a podcast. Once you've established the why and you're really sure that this is part of what you're going to do for your business, then the next question you have to answer is who is your audience? Because if you want to get started in a podcast, the key is understanding who you are actually going to be talking to. Because if you have a business, you have a particular audience that you want to work with. Now, it could be an existing audience, it could be suppliers, it could be internal audience, it could be new people, it could be existing people. There's a whole myriad of different things, and there may not be one single answer. But you have to understand who your audience is so you can build the show around it. Because it really is important that you set some expectations, both for you and for them. There needs to be a relationship that works for both parties. They need to get something out of it. You need to get something out of it. The podcast is a really important part of your business, but you need to set the expectations for how much time it's going to take you, what you're going to get out of it. Now's not the time to go into more detail, but I have talked about in previous episodes about the cascading effect of the podcast because it gives to more areas of your business than just the podcast itself. So they're the things that you want to think about in advance of it. So you can start building a strategy for some of the things you need to think about when you get into the details of it, because there are things that you need to consider when it comes to the podcast. Part of that is understanding how long is the podcast going to be. It's also about trying to understand, is it going to be every week, every 2 weeks it's going to be on, or perhaps even more regularly than that? Is it going to feature guests or no guests? Are you going to be positioned as the expert? Now, we've done particular podcast episodes on this in the past, so definitely check it out. It is absolutely critical. If you want to build your brand, to understand you need to be the expert. Being the host and being the expert are two different roles. I've gone into detail about that in the past. Do think about that as you are planning your podcast. Now, other things that you need to think about as well is whether it is going to be a video or audio-based podcast. Again, lots of pros and cons to that. And increasingly, the platforms like Apple are now pushing towards doing video. But sit and think about how much extra time it might take to build the video version of your podcast and whether, in fact, that is actually something that is worthwhile. Because the truth of the matter is that the podcast itself is not something that people sit down and watch a lot of. That's my gut feeling on it. It's something we've talked about in full episodes in the past about. It represents more time, energy, and effort to edit it. But if you want to do that, no problems at all. It is a decision you have to make as part of the process. Once you have all of those decisions made, there are some other key things that you start needing to think about. Think in terms of the equipment. So first of all, you need to get yourself a great microphone. Now we have a recommendation sheet which you can access in our resources, and details of that is in the show notes of how to access all of those things. Now we talk about a particular microphone that I recommend, which is the Rode NT USB Plus. It's a great microphone to have on your desk, and you can use it for Zoom and other things that you use. So it's an investment that's worthwhile. It's not particularly expensive. So get a quality microphone is one thing. The camera is another. Now, if you are looking to just keep it fairly simple, use the camera and equipment that you've got, whether it's your phone, whether it's a built-in, or whether you spend a small amount of money on an external camera. There are different types of cameras. And if you want to see the difference for a moment or two, the camera that I'm using here is quite an expensive camera. If we go and we switch it up and we look over to this camera, this is your more standard Logitech camera. It won't set you back a huge amount of money, and it certainly does a decent job. So these are some of the basics in terms of equipment. I would recommend that you think about a light. A light can add a huge amount of value. There's nothing worse than people sitting there and it's in the dark. The reason that the light is also so important, and again, we have talked about this in previous episodes quite a bit, but the simple reason is the more light you have on your face, the less hard that the camera has to work, and the better quality the image that you get as a result of it. So do think about that. You can get lights for not a great deal of money to be able to make a huge difference to what you're doing. Everything from, $20, $30 to some of those ring lights, but I recommend an LED light that you can put on a stand. It's what I'm using here today, and it's something that you can pick up very easily, again, in the recommendation sheet that we have in the show notes. So you've got the basics of all of that sorted, of how to, and you're nearly underway to get started. But there are some other things you need to think about. You need to think about how you're going to record the podcast. So are you going to do it in person at a studio? I don't necessarily recommend that. It can be a lot more pressure and effort to do that. And you also have to worry about all of the things that go alongside of it, not least of which is also a cost. And again, are enough people watching it to make a huge difference to be in a studio type environment like that? Or is there something that you can do at home? I've built this out of a home studio office. It's not difficult. It's something to think about. Once you get past that basic idea, it's then a question of what are you going to use to record? So a lot of people default to using Zoom. The quality of Zoom is not necessarily great, either for audio or video. It does take a huge amount of bandwidth. It is built for a different purpose. It's not built for podcasting. So I don't recommend Zoom. If you can, move to a dedicated piece of software that does do the recording for you. Right here today, we are recording on Ecamm Live, and which is fantastic if you have a Mac in particular. There are plenty of other tools that are out there. And again, we've talked about it in previous episodes. Descript is one. Certainly Riverside is another very popular one that you can talk to as well. Now, the reason I'm going to mention Descript in there, the value of Descript, it does two functions. It does the function of recording. It offers a recording studio environment, which is not bad. Still has some teething problems in my estimation, but not a bad option for you. The other option that it offers is around the editing, lots of AI tools and things to help you in that process. And that comes to the second part of it. Once you've recorded, you have to have the software to be able to edit it. Now, there are free software that you can get out there, and depending on what platform you're in, you might just use GarageBand if you're on a Mac, and that's okay. Or even iMovie is also okay to use. If that's what you know how to use, then go for that. There are more advanced options, anything from those sorts of software platforms like Descript right through to the Adobe platforms, Premiere Pro and the like, which are more for your professionals to be able to do that. The different level you're at, the different quality of the result that you're going to get at the end. Something to think about as well, because the way you present yourself, not just the way you look and what you've got in the background. And again, little tip, don't use a virtual background. If you can avoid it, use an actual real background. The things that you need to think about is how you deliver yourself in terms of the editing, the quality of the audio, the quality of the camera, all of those things make a difference to how your brand is perceived. It's the difference between showing up to work in an old singlet that's 5, 10 years old and a pair of shorts and thongs and turning up in nice work attire. Whatever that looks like that is appropriate for your brand is the same idea of how you should present the quality of the product at the end of the day. So now you've got yourself sorted. And again, we're skipping through things fairly quickly to try and get as much in as possible. And don't forget, again, that I did mention here, it's the details. You get a workbook as well to follow along with some of these, all part of the resources that we offer for free as part of the Podcast Done For You show. Now, one of the other things that you need to think about then is how you're going to publish and where you're going to publish. If you want to publish on all the major audio platforms, then certainly there are everything from free tools to paid ones. We certainly recommend Captivate.fm. That is a great tool to be able to use, gives you a lot of flexibility, but there are free tools, and Spotify does have a free tool, which is not bad for creators to be able to utilize that. Now that you've got there, you also need to think about getting it set up on YouTube and loading videos there on YouTube. You can load audio just as well. It's simple to do as part of an RSS feed from Captivate. So once you've set it up once, you only need to do it the once. But here's the thing, that you want a platform that's going to have everything and push all of the show notes and all of those kinds of things out to your audience very easily and dynamically. So there's a lot of things to think about with that. Okay, now we're coming to the crucial bit, because what you want to do then is map out the episodes. Get a really clear understanding of what it is that you are going to include in at least the next 20 episodes. That's right, 20, because 20 is the magic number for businesses. If you want to get in the top 1% of podcasts, well, you've got to get past 20 episodes. Sounds easy? Well, that's why 99% of podcasts seem to fail, because it's a lot harder than you think because of the time and energy and effort that's involved in doing it. It is something to think about in terms of your strategy. And it's why I go to the next thing that I think you need to think about, which is, do you have a production partner? My advice to you is you need to be the expert. You need to be seen as the expert, and you need to do the things in your business that you love doing. It's not producing a podcast. So look for a production partner that is going to take care of as much as you want in the process. Again, little plug for Podcast Done For You. That's what we do. If you're interested, reach out. Not a problem. We can have a free chat, assess what your podcast is going to be and what the options might be for you. But I want to go back to what it is that you need to do. When you're mapping out your episodes, make sure you have your audience in mind. Make sure it is achievable. Make sure there are lots of value that you can add along the way with things that you can talk freely to and about as part of the process. Share lots of stories, because that is one of the great tips for podcasting and getting started. Make sure you've got an outlet for sharing stories. So with stories in mind, let me fill you in on a couple of stories around podcasts that we have worked with. So I want to fill you in on some of the most common ones that we do. I sit down with people for 2 hours. We have an online conversation on some predetermined topics that we've done some research for online to find out what the audience actually wants. We've also worked in what are the stories that can fit into each of those different elements. What different examples can we give? Or more importantly, can the person who is the expert on the show, I'm just co-hosting in the show for them. And we produce those really simply. They turn up for 2 hours. They get 6 15 to 20-minute episodes. We put them out every 2 weeks. All they have to do is show up for 8 hours of recording a year and they're done. So that's a great story that I wanted to share with you about how simple a podcast can be. But there are also other examples where, again, personally, we've worked with everything from doing short interviews to longer interviews with guests. We've had panel-based podcasts. There are lots of different options and varieties for you to consider. So again, put your ideas together, reach out, happy to go through them with you. No obligation to do anything further. And we can map out what we think might be a great idea for you to make your podcast really succeed. So Now we come to the other part of the podcast of how to get started. You've got your topics that resonated. You've got all of everything sorted out right through to the editing and publishing. But the next part is the promotion. You need to make sure you have a plan to promote it. Don't just put the podcast up and hope that people will find it. You need to be finding ways to tell them about it, not just in the lead up to it. And I've seen some great campaigns building some excitement towards the forthcoming release of a podcast, right through to telling people about not just what is in the upcoming or the most recent episode, but going back to previous episodes and linking them up and making sure that people understand that dynamic. So it's a really important thing to think about when you're going through, that you want people to understand what your podcast is about and give them a reason to log in, not just once, but to subscribe and like and share and do all of those kinds of things that you want, so they keep coming back to your podcast. So all of those things are important, and we're rattling through these really quickly, but promotion is key. I'm going to come back to something I raised earlier on, the cascading effect of podcasts. Remember that once you've got the transcript and you've got the video and the audio recorded, you can create short reels, you can create social posts, blog articles, content for your website, articles for other people, workbooks like we have on this episode of the podcast. There's lots of things that you can do with it. The more you do with it, the more you use it, the more likely it is that people are going to find you, and the more reason that you have to go back to why you created the podcast in the first place. So these are all the key tips at what is going to get you started in a podcast. Thank you, first of all, to all of the people that did write in and asking if I could do a quick episode to summarize all the critical bits so you can wrap your head around the thought process. It can be overwhelming. I don't want you to be overwhelmed, so reach out if you are. We can go through a few things, as I mentioned, and see what fits and what works for you. Remember, podcasting is, without doubt, the most powerful tool you can have for your business because it gives to so many different areas, because it continues to educate and nurture an audience when used in the right way. So I urge you to think strongly about, yes, this is not an obstacle. This is just a map of things that we need to do to get started. The biggest tick that I can give you is go and tick the box of who is going to look after all of the bits and pieces for you. If you're doing it as a one-man band, well, it's going to take you away from your core business. And I'm not sure that ultimately you're going to get the return on investment, and therefore you're likely to be in the 99% of podcasts who don't make it to the 20 episode mark. We want you to succeed, to get further. So that's my big tip for you, production partner that is going to look after everything except being the expert. That's your role. That's what you've got to be. That's who people have to see you as. That's why you get started in a podcast. And this has been how to get your podcast started. I hope that this information has given you something high level to think about. In individual episodes, we are going through some of these different elements in more detail. So please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode of the podcast. Go back and look at the catalog and see all of those things. Check out the resources in the show notes so that you can get access to not only what we've produced as a result of this episode of the podcast, but to many of the past episodes as well. You'll be able to download lots of workbooks that will all be designed to help you maximize the podcast opportunity. And of course, if you want something to be talked about in a coming episode of the podcast, please write in, send me a direct message on LinkedIn where you can connect with me. Put something in the comments whatever platform you are listening in on or watching on. Find different ways to connect with me through the show notes. Love to hear from you. And we look forward to your company next time on Podcast Done For You Show.